Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. It's time for another basic deck discussion video, and last time we looked at the Hunter, Mage and Druid deck. This time we're going to be looking at the Pally, Priest and Rogue decks, the next three in the tabs at the top of the collection box. So just like I said last week, this is, well, first of all, this is part 2 of a part 4 series. The first part, like I said, dealt with the other 3 classes. One more part will deal with the next 3 hero classes, and the last one will be looking through the neutral cards to discuss, their placement and how good they are. But this week, we're going to be focusing on our Pally, Priest and Rogue deck. Yes. Adding to our collection of the basic deck discussions. And what this really aims to do is, if you're new to Hearthstone, to allow you to look at the different hero classes and based partly on their hero ability and, also in combination with the cards in the deck, what kind of deck you should be building around them, or at least at a basic level, what kind of decks are really good with them. There are obviously lots of variations and different types you can do, but there are some very basic builds with the hero classes that work incredibly well. So, with that being said, let us begin. And there we go. Now let's go take a look at the collection so we can see our cards. If you will load now, Hearthstone. There we go. And this is just after the patch has dropped today, so who knows? There might be new bugs for us to look at. So like I said, we're going to be looking at the Paladin, the Priest and the Rogue deck. So we're going to start with the Paladin deck here, guys. And basically the thing about the Paladin deck is this is one of those decks that is actually absolutely fantastic if you start in the game. It's up there with the Hunter in ease of building a deck with and playing, and the gameplay style of the Paladin. And yeah, it's a really great deck to play with if you kind of need a Hearthstone. It doesn't need a lot of how can I put it, combos and things like that. It's kind of a play it as you come type of deck, which is great for starting the game. You don't need to work out some crafty combos of cards to beat your opponent. It's relatively straightforward with the basic decks you can put together with Paladin. That being said, Paladin can be quite complicated with some of the decks that are put together, but that's not the aim of this discussion. This video we're going to be just looking at some basic builds based on the kind of design intent behind the classes. So if we want to kind of understand the design intent behind the Paladin, we look at its hero ability. It's a very good indicator because the hero ability itself is summon a minion. You create a minion. So that kind of then points to the fact that the Paladin is all about the minions. The Paladin is the general, and he commands his troops, and he also buffs his troops and looks after them. So, looking at the hero ability, it summons a minion, but then you look through the rest of the cards, you'll also see there's a lot of cards here that affect minions. You've got Blessing of Might, a Blessing of Wisdom, even things like Noble Sacrifice protects your minions from being attacked. I mean, there's secrets that bring your minions back. There's this ton of cards here, all about buffing and protecting your minions. Even a minion that helps protect minions. It's kind of insane. Carry on looking at your older Peacekeeper for helping to affect your enemy's minions. There's absolute huge amount of cards here that deal with affecting minions. So what you want to look at then, because the Paladin deck is so good at dealing with lots of minions, you generally want to build a deck around minions. It kind of makes sense. For example, if you're going to be building a deck that has lots of minions in it, though, you might have issues with things like spells for clearance. Now the point is that, especially with cards like this, for example, where you can put Divine Shields on your own minions, and where is the other one? Hand of Protection, where you can actually give one of your minions a Divine Shield directly with a spell. The point is that you should be using your minions on the field as your clearance. It doesn't rely a lot on spells. You do have some clearance spells in the Paladin deck, like the Consecration, for example, but it's kind of weak for the 4 mana that you pay for it. I mean, if you consider a mage has the Blizzard spell, which does only 2 damage as well, but also freezes. So, you look at, for example, True Silver Champion. This is a way to help keep enemy minions off the field, for clearance. But predominantly, you're going to be looking at using your older Argent Protector to put Divine Shields onto minions, or a Hand of Protection, or even a Blessing of Might. so that a Blessing of Kings, sorry, so that you can buff it up so that it won't die, and that you can pick off some big minions. All of this is centered around the minion styles. Now, the other thing to consider is that if a lot of minions is good for the Paladin because of the way it can protect stuff, maybe you should be finding ways to get as many minions as you can in the field. So, if we take a look for summon cards in the neutral deck, you can see, for example, Murloc Tidehunter. When you put this onto the field, it pops up another minion, so you get 2 for the price of 1. Harvest Golem's not a bad one either, because if it gets killed, it brings another minion back. Razorfen Hunter is also another good one to bring lots of minions. And then you can also look at the Silverhand Knight, for example, which is one of my favorites, just because it's relatively beefy, you know, considering, you know, what you're getting. I mean, 4/4 for 5 with a 2/2. So things like the Mage can't pick off the additional minion that's summoned. So there's a lot of good synergy in the Paladin deck with things like the Silverhand Knight. What I've also played with is if you've got something like an Onyxia, which summons a whole bunch of extra minions, that kind of stuff can work very well. But of course, it doesn't end there, because you want to be able to find ways to boost your minions even more. So what you want to do is you need to find other cards that you can put in there that help buff those little guys up a lot more, because you tend to have a lot of small minions, so you need to make them beefy, otherwise you're never actually going to beat your opponent. So if we take a look at, for example, the Stormwind Champion. This is a fantastic card, especially for late game, because it's a 6/6. It's actually quite beefy by itself, but it also, if you have other minions on the field, buff them up quite nicely. There's the other smaller, but allows it to be used earlier, the Raid Leader, which is also pretty handy. It only buffs the attack, but sometimes that's all you need if you want to just clear off a pesky enemy minion or want to do some extra damage to your opponent. So really, the Paladin deck is not a difficult one to discuss and describe. I mean, I'm pretty much done with it at the moment. It's all about the minions that you can get. Like I said, there are other tactics you can use to build decks for it. There's the Fat Pally deck by Criparian. He put together a very late game style play with the Paladin deck, which is a very tricky gameplay style to use, because you suffer in the early game and are very vulnerable then. So, you know, those are more advanced gameplay styles with the Paladin deck. The one that it fits most closely to its design principles and is easier to play is the one that involves lots of minion buff cards, minion buff minions, and multiple minions. You know, all those ones, the Razorfen Hunter, the Murloc Tidehunter, all those cards. Absolutely fantastic in this style of deck. And a couple of little cards to help pick off your minions. Okay, so what we're looking at next, though, we're going to look now at the Priest deck. And the Priest deck is a bit of a weird one. Before the major patch to Hearthstone, prior to the beta wipe, the Priest was meh. Yeah, it was barely passable. It was definitely not one of the stronger classes. It suffered a lot of problems. And Blizzard decided to buff it a bunch, which they did quite well. It's now, I see it all over the place. It's quite a common hero class now in play mode. Second only to Mage, I think, because damn, those mages are all over the place. But basically, the Priest now is it's a funny class to play, only because it straddles so many different play styles. I mean, if you look at the basics of it, you look at its hero power. It does 2 heal. So that does give you an idea of one of the play styles you can use with the Priest. The problem is that it also has other cards in its deck that change the way it plays, and this is why I tend to put the Priest into kind of an intermediate style of play. It's it's not the best for a new player to the game. You might get by as a new player, but you probably should play a bit more with, say, a Hunter or a Mage or a Paladin deck to kind of get used to the mechanics of the game more and what different cards do. It can be tricky to get used to. So let's take a look at the Priest deck so you guys can see what I mean, because When you consider the hero power of the priest, like I said, it's that +2 heal to any character. You know, even enemy ones or the enemy himself, if you really want to, if you're dumb enough to do that. But the reason why it allows you to target those others is because of certain cards, such as, and I just need to find the damn thing now. Where are you, Shadow Form? This one, for example. And there is also another one that you can play as a minion, Organized Soul Priest. Now, what those two cards essentially do is turn your hero power into a damaging ability. Now, there is only one other class that has a 2 damage ability, and that's the Hunter. But that's only towards the enemy, your opponent, the hero, not to minions. These 2 cards allow you to turn your hero power into 2 damage on anything, yourself included. I've seen people actually play games with this Organized Soul Priest, and they heal themselves. So it gets a bit tricky. You need to switch that little flip that switch in your mind and realize that it's actually going to hurt you instead. So that's the other side of the priest, is that because you can change the hero power into damage, now you change from being a sort of healing and health buffing class into a shadowy damage causing class. What confuses things a bit more, though, is when you consider cards such as Mind Control. There it is, Mind Control, where you can take control of an enemy minion. You've got cards like the Cabal Shadow Priest, which does the same thing, but for only minions for 2 or less attack. Shadow Madness, which lets you gain control of an enemy minion. So you can see it's got a mixture of the sort of shadow and holy side of the priest from World of Warcraft. So it's difficult to describe how to build a deck based on the design intent, because it's actually got 2 design intents. That's the problem with it. It's designed around being able to do things like give a minion +2 health. So if you have a 5 health creature, you give it this, and now it has 2 health. Also doing things like doubling a minion's health. So you give it that 2 health, now you give it a double, now it's 14 health. Now you give it an inner fire, now it has 14 attack instead. Quite a powerful combination there to do that kind of thing. You can also use, for example, a card like the Crazed Alchemist in your deck to swap the attack and health of a minion, which does the same thing as that the inner fire. So that is kind of the one playstyle that a lot of priests were using before the wipe and are still using quite successfully today, along with things such as, for example, the Lightwell, which automatically just heals a damaged minion or character, a friendly character, which is quite nice. It can be very, very useful, the Lightwell. Included in that, you'll often find cards like the Holy Smite for a bit of picking off enemy minions, and the ubiquitous, if I find it, Holy Nova. So yeah, Holy Nova is almost a must-have no matter what style of priest deck you play, because it's kind of the only really big board clear that priest has. And you can see there's more of these types of cards. Give a friendly minion +3 health. Let's see if I can find another one. Okay, yeah. So those are the ones the ones that kind of buff your minions in health, and then switch their health. Or if you just use the Lightspawn, which always has an attack equal to its health, you never need to swap the health. So these can get very scary very quickly. So that is the basic idea of one of the ways to play the priest deck, is to use it as one of these health buffing, and then swap it for the attack kind of style. What is that? I'm trying to recall the one beast. Where are you now? Is it 4? Yeah. If you look at, for example, a card like the Oasis Snapjaw, and just today I played a game where somebody was using the Oasis Snapjaw, a priest, and I ignored it because it's 2 damage, and I wanted to try and finish him off, to my detriment, because all he did was he doubled the minion's health, then he to 14 now, so then he doubled it again to 28, then he swapped it, and I was dead. All in one turn. So that kind of gameplay style, when you pick especially high health creatures like this, when you double high health, it gets very high health. So it can get quite terrifying. So that's just an example of the kind of play style that can include. Now, the obvious other one, as I mentioned, is, for example, to use something like the Shadow Form, because now you're doing damage directly instead of healing. And this has become a very popular deck now because you can include things like the Silence for 0 mana card. Silence is a very powerful feature of the Priest deck. This is often included even in the healing style, just because it's so useful, Silence. Often including even things like Mind Vision to put copies of cards, so you get card draw off of your opponent, essentially. If we look at Shadowword Pain to destroy minions, Mind Blast to deal direct damage to the hero. A lot of priest decks don't actually take this because it's very limited. It's just damage to the hero. Essentially, that's useless unless the hero is at 5 or below health. And at that point, you should be in a good enough position to just pick them off anyway. You'd rather have other utility in your deck. Shadowword Death. So, I don't know if you've noticed, but you get Shadowword Pain for destroy a minion with 3 or less attack, and with 5 or more attack. So if your opponent has a minion with 4 attack, you've got a bit of a problem, but that's beside the point. Thought Steal as well, in the kind of shadowy priest style, to copy more cards from your opponent's deck. Mass Dispel, so you can silence everything that your enemy has. Shadow Madness to take control. Mind Control to take control. Those kinds of ideas, using all that kind of the Cabal Shadow Priest, all these kinds of cards to just take over your enemy minions and use them against him. So that's the other kind of priest style, and it makes sense if you tie it in with the 2 damage Shadow Form. It works incredibly well, because not only can you take his minions and then attack with them, you can then also cause more destruction with 2 damage on his minions with your hero power. So like I said, it's a tricky one. The priest is difficult. You need to actually decide. With the priest deck, you actually need to decide what style you're going to play. Are you going to go for the high health, high attack, swapping healing style? Or are you going to go more for the sort of shadowy style with all the mind control and, shadow word spells and all that kind of stuff? Because you can't, it's not a really good idea to combine them together because they don't synergize very, very nicely. And then you're kind of diluting the strength of your deck. So you want to try and stick to one strength, one play style, which will work well. Yeah, the priest. I haven't actually played the priest style a lot since the patch. I need to get into it more. Played a couple of games, just to kind of see what the changes were like. I do like the Lightwell. It's one of my favorite cards when I'm playing my sort of Healy health style. It's a lot of fun to put that out and then watch. In turn 2, to have a 0-5 out, watch your opponent scramble trying to find a way to get rid of this quickly. Not that easy. So yeah, that is that's the basics of the priest deck. Like I said, it's an intermediate style. It's a bit difficult to really build a good deck around it until you've decided which route you're going for. Coffee time. But it can be very rewarding and fun one to play. And like I said, I've seen a lot of people actually playing that now, so it's worthwhile taking a look at. Now, the next deck we are going to look at is the Rogue deck. So let's just sit back and consider what the Rogue is. Okay, the Rogue, if you look at its hero ability, is to equip a 1/1 dagger. Now, where priests were buffed after the patch, rogues were nerfed, and nerfed quite a bit, because the Rogue hero ability, if you didn't have a weapon equipped, it would give you a 1/1. If you did have a weapon equipped, it would buff it it would give it an extra attack for that turn, which was phenomenal. It was absolutely awesome. The problem I think that Blizzard realized is if you equip any rogue weapon, for example, a Perdition's Blade or an Assassin's Blade, and you then use your hero ability to buff that, you get a Perdition's Blade that's a 3/2, or an Assassin's Blade that's a 4/4. And if I try to look any more, I can't see any more rogue weapons here. Okay, well, never mind. So, that was actually causing a real problem. And then you consider things like you've got your Deadly Poison here. Now, you throw a Deadly Poison, which gives it +2. An example, you've got an Assassin's Blade with 3 damage, okay? Then you just add that, now it's got 5. Then you add your hero ability, now it's a 6 damage weapon. That's kind of terrifying. So, Blizzard removed the +1 attack for the turn part of that hero ability, but still, it's still not a bad hero class to play. And the entire point of the sort of rogue hero ability is to give you the opportunity, kind of similar to the druid deck, is to try and use your hero to help maintain control on the board. It's only 1 damage, but you're not going to be necessarily attacking huge, big, 6-7 damage creatures with your hero, because that's semi-suicidal, really. You don't want to do that much damage to yourself. So it's just there to help you with the early game, to just pick off these little beasts that your opponent might drop and so on. And if we go ahead and take a look at the rogue deck itself, you'll see there's a lot of these cards that can do that for you. There's a lot of very low cost rogue cards, especially 0 cost cards. I mean, there's 3 of them here. Your Preparation, Shadow Step, for example, and the most expensive spell you've got, I'm trying to see, is Assassinate at 5. Well, unless you can't sprint, I'm talking about damage. This is Assassinate, which destroys an enemy minion completely, no matter how much health it's got, which is pretty powerful. And that's the most expensive spell you've got. So if you consider that the rogue deck has all these really cheap spells to cast, it has a good way of keeping control of the board. Now, it also works very well in combos, and that's one of the things that set the rogue deck apart from the others, is its unique little thing is about combos. So if you look at Eviscerate, for example, what combo really means, to just describe it, is if you play a card. Okay, to set up a combo just means you need to play another card before you play this one. So if I didn't play another card, I'd deal 2 damage to whatever I target. If, however, I played any other card, even the coin, then the combo is triggered, and I'll deal 4 damage instead, which is pretty powerful. And once you start the combo, you can just continue hitting all the combo ones. So you can drop a coin and then give a minion +4 attack, and then where's this combo? Then Eviscerate for 4 damage, and then you could, combo Defias Ringleader. So the combos can, stagger together like that. It's not a problem. But that's kind of the thing with the rogue deck, is being able to combine things and make them more powerful. Just like, if you know anything about it, it's good how they tie into World of Warcraft. If you know anything about World of Warcraft, you know that the rogue hero class is a combo class. You hit with this attack once, you hit with this attack again, and you're building up combo points, and then you use your combo points, and that's what they're trying to do with the deck in Hearthstone. Now, the problem with the rogue deck is building a good deck around it. Now, unfortunately, the rogue deck is quite an expert deck to play. It's not a very simple one to really build an outstanding deck around, because it's a tricky sort of gameplay style. It's not entirely obvious. One of the really good decks that I've seen built with it is something that it's gone under many names, but it was also called the Miracle Rogue deck, and you can see here I've already got it created here. So you'll see, for example, in this deck you've got cards, you've got all the spells pretty much, all the low cost spells, all the way up to Shiv. And so that's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18 spell cards, essentially. And then very few minions, in fact. In fact, there's 2 more spell cards. So there's a lot of spell cards here. What makes it so tricky a deck to play is that it all kind of revolves around this card and that one. Your Mana Addict and your Questing Adventurer. Now, to describe the gameplay is not simple, because essentially what you need to do in the early game, until you get to about turn 5 or 6, you need to be very cautious with how you use your cards, and very discriminate. You need to try and limit your use of your cards. Keep as many of your cards as you can, which isn't easy to do, because obviously your opponent's going to be dropping things onto the field, which you need to take care of. So ultimately, what you end up doing is, for example, you've got this Novice Engineer. Okay, let me take a step back. See what I mean? It's difficult to try and describe this, because there's no real starting point to this. What you do is you play your first few turns, and you use your simple spells, such as your backstabs, to destroy enemy minions if you can. You use your Sinister Strike. You can use your Eviscerate even. But you try and your shivs, you try and keep these cards back as much as you can. Because ultimately, when you get to around turn 5 or 6, that's when you'll go ahead and you'll drop a Mana Addict. You'll drop a Questing Adventurer. And this all depends on whether you got the coin, if it's a turn 5 or turn 6. So if you haven't got the coin on turn 6, you drop these 2, and then you drop a Conceal. So this is the basic gameplay of this deck, is that you drop those 2, the Mana Addict and the Questing Adventurer, and then you drop a Conceal, which makes them untargetable, unless your opponent uses AoE. Now the great thing is, it's a turn 6, and your opponent is probably going to go to turn 6. If you didn't have the coin, yes, they're going to go into turn 6. So if it's a mage, they can't use their fire board clear spell thing that does 4 damage. They can't do that, so that's good news for you. Your priest can do that, but the health of these is high enough that they will survive, so that wouldn't affect them, except maybe the Questing Adventurer. But the Conceal will buff the Questing Adventurer up, so that's fine. So the basic idea is here, you've got these 2 out, you drop a Conceal, you pass the turn, you wait for him to do whatever he's going to do, and now comes the time to win. Because what you end up doing is you'll backstab everything you can, you'll use Preparation to drop the cost of your next spell, you'll Shadow Step, you'll drop your Novice Engineer in. In the meantime, playing every single one of these cards now is buffing your Questing Adventure, and every spell is buffing your Mana Addict. And remember, they can attack this turn. So you drop your Novice Engineer, then you do a Shadow Step to get it back, and you've just drawn a card. Now it costs 2 less, so you drop it back in again because it's free, and your Questing Adventurer is still getting pumped up big time. You get another new card. Now you drop your Cold Blood, your Sinister Strike, your Eviscerate, your Sap, your Shiv. Anything you've got that you can drop in that turn, you put it out onto the field as fast as you can. Even another Conceal if it gives you some more damage. And then once you've emptied your hand of all your spells, you hit him very hard. And usually that ends up in a win. So you can see it's a very technical thing. It's very patient style, controlling your enemy minions as best you can without using up all your cards that you've got available, and then just absolute annihilation at, turn 6. Pretty powerful stuff. But that's just one type of gameplay style, because the Rogue deck, like I said, it's a very technical deck, and you can actually play many styles with it. But generally it's based around controlling enemy minions, and then finding a way to get your own minions, and the Defias Ringleader is a very popular one, to get your own minions out to then do damage to your opponent and killing them. It's a control deck, essentially. And even the Miracle Rogue deck is a control deck up to the point where you drop those cards and use all your spells and then go bananas. But it's a lot of fun to play. So, yeah, that is essentially the Rogue deck. And just to mention, guys, if you do want to get more updates on the videos that I'm making discussing the decks, feel free to subscribe. I will be posting another video this weekend probably about the which ones have we got left? The Shaman, the Warlock, and the Warrior decks. Yes, we'll be doing a video on that soon. And just to mention, I'm also now a contributing author to Hearthstone Elite. It's hearthstoneelite.com. I should be putting a URL up here somewhere for you to see. It's actually a very cool site. I'm helping build the site up as well with a bunch of other people, making it an awesome resource for any Hearthstone folks. And essentially what I'm doing is videos such as this, the sort of deck building and strategy videos that I'm putting up. I'm going to be doing kind of a text-based transcription. So if you can't watch my videos and would still like to get the info, you can feel free to go pop over to that site and get the info you need. It's essentially the same thing that I'm talking about now, just in text format, which, if you're at work, kind of handy. You don't need to get in trouble with the boss. Other than that, yeah, thanks so much for joining me, guys. And don't forget, Hearthstone Elite, subscribe, join my Google Plus page. There should be links down there. Follow me on Twitter, all that good stuff to get updates about new videos. And I will see you guys next time for the next 3 classes of our deck building, basic deck building. Cool. Thanks, guys. Ciao.